My name is Clara, and I'm 27 years old. My grandfather's funeral should have been a day to honor his life, but it ended up being the single most humiliating day of mine. I had to watch as my family carved up his financial empire like a pack of wolves, while I was left holding a single envelope containing a plane ticket. Where are you watching from right now? Let me know your city in the comments, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the odd one out in your own family. You'll definitely want to see how this all played out. The reading of my Grandpa Arthur's will happened in the polished, wood-paneled office of his attorney downtown. My mother, Eleanor, sat perfectly poised in her black designer suit, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that had yet to see a single tear. My father, Richard, kept glancing at his expensive watch, his mind clearly already on how he would spend his cut of the inheritance. My brother Leo was sprawled in his chair as if he already owned the building, and my cousin Sophia was busy whispering what sounded like financial calculations to her husband. Mr. Davies, Grandpa's lawyer for decades, cleared his throat and started to read. To my son, Richard Sterling, I leave the family shipping business, Sterling Shipping, and all its associated assets. My dad's face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. The company was easily worth $40 million. To my daughter-in-law, Eleanor Sterling, I bequeath the family estate in Sonoma, including all its furnishings and artwork. My mom let a genuine smile slip for the first time since the funeral service. That estate was valued at around $30 million. To my grandson, Leo Sterling, I leave my collection of classic sports cars and the penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle. Leo gave a subtle fist pump beneath the table. The cars alone were worth a small fortune. To my granddaughter, Sophia Reed, I leave my yacht, the Serenity, and the vacation home in the Hamptons. Sophia squeezed her husband's hand, a look of pure triumph on her face. Then Mr. Davies paused. He looked up from the document, and his eyes met mine. My heart started pounding in my chest as every head in the room turned to stare at me. This was it. I had always been the closest to Grandpa. He was the one who taught me how to play chess, took me sailing on his boat, and shared endless stories about how he built his empire from absolutely nothing. Surely he had left me something meaningful. To my granddaughter, Clara Sterling, Mr. Davies went on, I leave this envelope. That was it, just an envelope. The room, which had been silent with anticipation, erupted in a wave of awkward, uncomfortable snickers. My mother actually let out a chuckle and patted my knee in a horribly condescending way. Well, darling, I'm sure it's something sentimental inside. Maybe a lovely letter. But I could read the real story on their faces. They found it absolutely hilarious. Poor, sweet Clara, the granddaughter who'd spent every single summer helping Grandpa with his business projects, who'd listened to all his tales of Geneva and Las Vegas, who'd been his chess partner for over a decade, was left with nothing but an envelope while they all became multimillionaires. Acho que seu avô não te amava tanto assim, Mom said, mangling the Portuguese she'd picked up on a vacation, trying to sound cultured as she laughed. I guess your grandfather didn't love you that much after all. The words felt like a physical slap. 27 years of family events, of being the responsible one, of helping everyone else with their messes, and this is what they thought of me. I was the afterthought, the leftover. Leo leaned in close, a smirk playing on his lips. Maybe it's Monopoly money, sis. That would be about right for your kind of luck. I gripped the small envelope, my hands starting to tremble. I could feel something inside other than paper. It wasn't thick, not like a fat check, but there was definitely more than just a letter in there. Sophia chimed in from across the table. Don't look so heartbroken, Clara. I'm sure Grandpa left you something appropriate for your station in life. Her tone made it perfectly clear what she thought my station was. I stood up so quickly that the leather chair groaned behind me. "If you'll excuse me," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I need some air." Their laughter echoed behind me as I walked out of the office and down the long hall. I could hear my mom telling someone, "Oh, she's always been so dramatic. Arthur probably left her a nice little keepsake, or maybe some advice on finding a husband." In the elevator, finally alone with just my reflection in the polished steel doors, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a first-class ticket on a flight to Geneva, Switzerland, dated for the following week, and a single elegant sentence written in Grandpa's familiar, strong handwriting. "Trust activated on your 27th birthday, sweetheart. Time to claim what's always been yours." But that wasn't what stole the air from my lungs. It was the other two items tucked inside. The second item was a sleek, embossed business card. It read, "Duke Antoine de Valois, Private Secretary," in elegant gold script. On the back, in Grandpa's handwriting, were the words, "He manages your trust." The third item was a bank statement from a private Swiss bank, addressed to the Clara S. Sterling Trust. The balance at the bottom made the world go fuzzy. $421 million. $421 million. I stared at the numbers, counting the zeros over and over. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper. This had to be a mistake, some kind of cruel, elaborate prank. But the bank's letterhead was real. The account numbers looked official, and Grandpa Arthur's handwriting was unmistakable. When I got back to my little apartment that night, my mind still reeling, I dialed the international number printed on the statement. After being passed through 3 different departments and answering a long list of security questions, a Swiss banker, with flawless English, confirmed the unbelievable. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. Your trust was established when you were 16 years old and has been under professional management for the past 11 years. Your grandfather was quite specific that the activation date must coincide with your 27th birthday. But I never signed anything to create a trust," I stammered. "Your grandfather established it as the settler. As you were a minor at the time, your consent was not required. The trust has been actively generating returns and reinvesting profits from various international business holdings." Business holdings. That phrase sent a shiver down my spine. I thought back to all those chess games where Grandpa would pose hypothetical business problems to me, asking my thoughts on hotel management, customer service strategies, and how to position a brand in the market. I had always assumed he was just making conversation. "What kind of business holdings?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am not authorized to disclose specific details over the phone, Ms. Sterling. However, Duke Antoine has been fully briefed and will provide you with a complete overview of your assets upon your arrival in Geneva." After I hung up, I just sat there in my tiny apartment, staring at the bank statement. The family group chat was already blowing up with pictures of everyone's new inheritances. Leo had posted a link to a luxury car magazine. Sophia was browsing real estate websites for the Hamptons. Not a single person had even bothered to ask what was in my envelope. The next morning, at breakfast with my parents, I made the mistake of bringing up my plans. "I'm thinking of taking that trip to Geneva. You know, with the ticket Grandpa left me." My dad almost choked on his coffee. "Geneva. Clara, that's going to set you back thousands in hotels and food. You know your teaching salary can't handle that kind of extravagance." I thought about the bank statement tucked safely in my purse. The ticket is first class, and it's already paid for. My mom laughed dismissively. "Oh, Clara, sweetie, Geneva is for people like, well, people with real money. You'll feel completely out of your element. It's all high finance, watch boutiques, and Michelin star restaurants. If only she knew. Maybe she can get some good Instagram pictures, Leo suggested with a sneer. Show her students what real wealth looks like before she comes back to her little classroom. I could feel my face burning with humiliation. But underneath the shame, there was something new growing. It was knowledge. It was power. It was the quiet understanding that I wasn't the poor relation they all believed me to be. Maybe Grandpa had a reason for sending me there, I said softly. Oh, honey, Mom sighed, her voice dripping with pity. Your grandfather was 93 years old. His mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be toward the end. But I remembered those conversations differently. Grandpa had been as sharp as a tack, discussing complex investment deals right up until his final weeks. When he spoke of Geneva and Las Vegas, he did so with the casual familiarity of someone who knew those worlds intimately. That afternoon, I called in sick to my teaching job and spent hours on my computer. Duke Antoine de Valois was very real, very legitimate, and according to several financial journals, managed billions of dollars in international investments for a select group of ultra-high net worth families. And now, apparently, I was one of them. The night before my flight, I packed my nicest dresses and every ounce of confidence I could find. My mom called one last time, a final attempt to dissuade me. Clara, you're making a huge mistake. You could trade that ticket for something practical. The ticket's non-refundable, Mom. Well then, at least promise me you won't embarrass the family. Don't go around telling people you're Arthur Sterling's granddaughter and expecting special treatment. I hung up the phone without making any promises. As I did a final check of my luggage, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 27 years old, brown hair, average height, nothing special, according to my family. But Grandpa had seen something else. He always used to say I had his eyes, his instincts, his stubborn streak. Tomorrow, I was going to find out if he was right. The first-class cabin on the flight to Geneva was a world away from anything I had ever known. The flight attendant called me Miss Sterling with genuine warmth, offered me champagne before we even took off, and made sure my every need was met during the long flight. As we soared over the Atlantic, I tried to wrap my head around what that bank statement truly meant. $421 million wasn't just money. It was power. It was security. It was freedom. It was the ability to never again worry about rent or car payments or student loans. At the Geneva airport, I had planned on just getting a taxi. But as I wheeled my single suitcase through customs, I saw a man in a perfectly tailored black suit holding a small sign with my name on it. Not just Clara or Miss Sterling, but Miss Clara Sterling, beneficiary of the Sterling International Trust. My knees almost buckled. The driver was polite and formal, loading my bag into a gleaming black sedan. As we drove along the scenic highway hugging Lake Geneva, he made small talk in a lightly accented English. Is this your first time visiting our city, Miss Sterling? Yes, I managed to say. It's beautiful. His Grace the Duke is very much looking forward to our meeting. He has been personally managing your trust's Swiss holdings for several years now. Swiss holdings, plural. Geneva revealed itself slowly. First, the famous Jet d'eau fountain came into view, a plume of water against the sky. Then, the shoreline lined with grand hotels and the headquarters of private banks, their facades exuding an aura of quiet, immense wealth. Finally, we began to climb the winding streets of the old town. We didn't stop at a modern office building. Instead, the driver guided the sedan through a discreet iron gate and into a private, cobblestoned courtyard that looked like it hadn't changed in centuries. Miss Sterling, the driver said as he opened my door, If you would please follow me. We walked through corridors adorned with paintings that looked like they belonged in the Louvre. My teacher's salary had never prepared me for spaces like this. Everything whispered of old money, of real power, of generations of influence. Finally, we stopped before a heavy, ornate wooden door. The driver knocked twice, then opened it for me. "Miss Sterling," he announced, "your appointment." I stepped into what could only be described as a private study, though it was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the lake and the mountains beyond. Behind a massive antique desk sat a man who looked exactly like his pictures, Duke Antoine de Valois. He rose as I entered and came around the desk to greet me. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, and carried himself with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having had to prove anything to anyone. "Miss Sterling," he said, extending his hand. His English was perfect, cultured. "I am Antoine. Thank you for coming." I shook his hand, suddenly very aware of how out of place I must have looked. "Your Grace, I have so many questions." He smiled, a warm and genuine smile. "Please, call me Antoine, and I have many answers. Your grandfather was not only a dear friend of my family's, but also one of the most brilliant strategic investors I have ever had the pleasure of knowing." He gestured for me to sit in one of the plush leather chairs facing his desk. "Miss Sterling, Clara, your grandfather began planning your financial future when you were still a child. He established the Sterling International Trust when you were 16, with very precise instructions regarding your education, both formal and practical." "Practical education?" I asked. All those conversations about business, about reading people, about thinking several moves ahead in a negotiation. "He wasn't just sharing stories with you, Clara. He was training you." Antoine opened a thick, leather-bound folder on his desk. "Your trust currently holds controlling interests in several major properties. The Grand Lac Hotel and Casino here in Geneva, which generates approximately 50 million euros in profit annually. The Apex Tower and Resort in Las Vegas, which produces roughly $150 million a year. Not to mention commercial real estate portfolios in London, Tokyo, and Sydney." I just stared at him, my mouth hanging slightly open. "Your grandfather also ensured all tax obligations were expertly managed through the trust's structure. You have been receiving a modest annual stipend of $70,000, enough to live comfortably as a teacher, but not enough to draw any unwanted attention. The money in my savings account, distributed from your trust, though you were not aware of the source. Your grandfather wanted you to learn the value of work and to experience an ordinary life before you understood your true financial standing." Everything was suddenly clicking into place. Why I'd always been able to afford my apartment without struggling like my colleagues. Why I never really stressed about money the way other people did. Why Grandpa had always seemed so utterly confident about my future. "Antoine," I said slowly, "how much am I actually worth?" He consulted another document. "As of this morning's market close, the trust's total net value is approximately $1.5 billion. I gripped the arms of the leather chair to keep from sliding onto the floor. "You're a billionaire, Clara. You always have been." I spent the rest of that day in Antoine's office, going over documents that confirmed everything he had told me. Trust agreements, property deeds, financial statements, tax filings, all managed by teams of professionals whose names I'd never heard, all working on behalf of a trust I never knew existed. "Your grandfather was very clear about the timing," Antoine explained, as I numbly flipped through page after page of legal jargon. He wanted you to experience a normal life, to understand work and responsibility before you learned about your inheritance. But why hide it all? Why not just tell me? Antoine's expression softened. Because he knew your family, Clara. He knew that if they understood your true inheritance, they would treat you differently. They would either resent you, try to control you, or see you only as a source of money instead of as a person. I thought of the will reading, of their condescending laughter, of my mother's cruel words. They had revealed their true colors with perfect clarity. Your grandfather wanted you to see how they truly felt about you before you gained the power to change the entire dynamic, Antoine continued. He said you needed to understand who genuinely cared about you versus who would only care about your money. And now? Now, he said with a small smile, you decide how to use what you have always owned. That evening, Antoine had arranged for me to have a private tour of the Grand Lac Hotel. As the general manager, a man named Jean-Luc, showed me through my property, I had to keep reminding myself that I wasn't just a tourist. I was the owner. The resort was magnificent. 400 luxury suites, a casino floor that hummed with quiet energy, a world-class spa. Everything was immaculate, profitable, and completely surreal. The property has maintained a 95% occupancy rate for the past 3 years, Jean-Luc explained, as we stood on the balcony of the presidential suite. Your grandfather, or rather your trust, has been an excellent owner. Very hands-off, but always supportive of capital improvements to maintain quality. My grandfather managed this remotely. Through video conferences with your advisory team, he was remarkably knowledgeable about hospitality operations for someone who had never formally worked in the industry. But he had worked in the industry, I realized. He had worked through me. All those conversations we'd had about what makes guests feel welcome, about balancing luxury with comfort, he had been learning from my perspective, the perspective of someone who understood what ordinary people wanted from extraordinary experiences. Back in my 5-star hotel suite that night, I decided to call my family. The group text was still buzzing. Leo had made an offer on a penthouse in Miami. Sophia was planning to quit her job to become a lifestyle influencer. I almost laughed out loud. They were ecstatic about their millions, while I was sitting on billions. But what struck me most wasn't the money. It was the profound realization that Grandpa had protected me. While they had received instant gratification, he had given me something far more precious, the chance to discover my own strength before I ever needed to use it. My phone buzzed. A text from my dad. "How's the vacation going? Hope you're not spending too much money." I looked around my presidential suite at the view of the lake stretching to the horizon, at the bottle of champagne that cost more than his monthly car payment. "It's very educational," I texted back. The next morning, Antoine arranged for the company jet to take me to Las Vegas. As I settled into the plush leather seats of an airplane that I apparently owned, I thought about what I wanted to do with this newfound knowledge. I could fly home and reveal everything at once, shock them all with the truth, make them feel small for ever underestimating me. Or I could be strategic. I could use what Grandpa Arthur had taught me about thinking several moves ahead. As the jet climbed into the sky, leaving Switzerland behind, I made my choice. It was time to play chess. The Apex Tower and Resort in Las Vegas was even more dazzling than its Geneva counterpart. 50 floors of gleaming black glass rose from the Strip like a monument to success. My monument, apparently. Isabel Reed, the Vegas property manager, met me at the private airfield with a limousine that would have made my family's jaws drop to the floor. She was sharp, professional, and had no idea she was speaking to her actual boss. "Miss Sterling," she said, as we settled into the limo's cool leather interior, "your trust's representative said you wanted a full operational tour. I'm excited to show you what we've accomplished here." "How long have you been managing the Apex?" I asked. 8 years now. It's been an incredible journey watching it grow. Your trust has been the perfect owner, supportive of innovation, but always smart about risk. As we toured the resort, Isabel showed me financial reports that made my head spin. The casino floor was the main engine, but the hotel, restaurants, and a resident Cirque du Soleil show all contributed massively to the bottom line. Everything was meticulously managed, incredibly profitable, and still growing. "Your trust has been discussing expansion," Isabel mentioned as we sat in the penthouse suite, which I also apparently owned. "There's interest in acquiring similar properties in Dubai and Singapore." "Really?" I said, trying to sound casual. "What kind of timeline are they looking at?" "Nothing concrete yet, but the preliminary analysis is very promising. Your financial team seems quite confident about international growth." "My financial team." I had a financial team. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours on a series of video calls with advisors I had never met, but who had been managing my fortune for years. My CPA, who had been filing my tax returns and maintaining the legal fiction that I was just a teacher receiving a modest trust distribution. My investment manager, who had grown my portfolio from hundreds of millions to over $1 billion. And my legal team, who had structured everything to be ironclad and protect my privacy. My lead advisor, a man named David, explained, "Miss Sterling, your grandfather left very specific instructions on how to handle your financial awakening. He anticipated you might want to make some significant strategic moves once you understood your position." "What kind of moves?" "He thought you might be interested in strategic acquisitions, particularly in markets where you have personal knowledge or family connections." Family connections. An idea began to spark in my mind. That evening, I had dinner with Isabel at the resort's flagship restaurant. As we ate food that cost more per bite than I used to spend on a week's worth of groceries, I started asking some casual questions. Hypothetically, I said, if someone wanted to acquire a small shipping company, say, one worth around $40 or $50 million, how would that work? Isabel raised an eyebrow. $50 million is pocket change for a trust of your size. We could structure that through one of our existing corporate entities. The acquisition could be completed in less than 30 days. Is this hypothetical company of particular interest? I thought about my dad's company, Sterling Shipping. I thought about how he'd always struggled with debt and the costs of expansion. I thought about how a sudden cash infusion could solve all his problems, while simultaneously giving me control of the business I'd grown up hearing about. "It might be," I said carefully. When I called Antoine later that night, he listened thoughtfully as I laid out my idea. "You want to acquire your father's company?" "I want to save it," I clarified. "Dad's been struggling with cash flow ever since he expanded the fleet. He's far too proud to ever ask for help. But if the right buyer came along with the right offer, and you believe you are the right buyer, I think I'm the only buyer who would actually care about the employees keeping their jobs and about the company maintaining the culture my dad built." Antoine was quiet for a moment. "Clara, this would be your first major business decision as a billionaire. Are you certain you want it to involve your family?" "My family won't know it involves me. To them, it will just look like a generous offer from some foreign investment firm." "And you are comfortable with that deception?" I thought about their laughter at the will reading, about their casual assumptions about my worth. about their complete dismissal of my intelligence. For now, I said, yes. The next morning, I flew back to Seattle with a plan. I would give my family one last chance to see me for who I really was, and if they continued to underestimate me, well, I would show them exactly what underestimation costs. Back in Seattle, I sat in my small apartment reviewing financial reports from properties around the world while my family remained completely unaware of the person I had become. The contrast was almost dizzying. I'd spent my morning on a video call with my Dubai acquisition team, discussing a resort purchase that would cost more than my entire family's combined inheritance. Now, I was getting ready for dinner at my parents' house, where they would probably ask if I'd been careful not to spend too much money on my vacation. The family dinner was tonight, and my mom had specifically asked me to bring my laptop. She said I was good with computers and could help them organize their financial planning. If only she knew what kind of financial planning I'd been doing lately. I had just spent the afternoon having my lawyers prepare a preliminary acquisition offer for Sterling Shipping. The research was concerning. My dad's company was more vulnerable than I had even realized. He'd taken on a huge amount of debt for a fleet expansion, and while the business was profitable on paper, it was cash poor and dangerously over-leveraged. A determined buyer could easily force a sale. My phone rang. It was Isabel from Vegas. "Clara, the analysis on Sterling Shipping is done. The company is exactly as you described, profitable, but under serious financial stress. Our offer would solve their cash flow crisis overnight while giving you a solid regional shipping operation. What kind of timeline are we looking at? We can present an offer as soon as next week, anonymous, of course, through one of our existing shell companies. A clean transaction, generous terms, and no obvious link back to you. And if they refuse, honestly, they can't afford to. The company needs a significant capital injection within the next 6 months, or they'll be forced to sell off assets or take on even more debt at a terrible rate." After I hung up, I sat there, staring out my apartment window toward my parents' neighborhood. A part of me felt a pang of guilt about what I was planning, but a much larger part of me remembered every family gathering where I'd been sidelined, every assumption that I wasn't smart enough for business talk, every time they'd treated me like the family charity case. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, the whole family was there. Leo was scrolling through luxury car websites on his tablet. Sophia was showing my mom pictures of renovation ideas for her Hamptons house. My dad was reading the financial news, probably researching investment strategies for his $40 million windfall. "Clara," Sophia called out when she saw me. "There's our little world traveler. How was Geneva? Did you take lots of pictures?" "It was very educational," I said, settling into my usual spot at the dining table. "I still can't believe you actually went," Leo said without looking up. "That place is for serious money. Must have been awkward being surrounded by all those millionaires." "You adapt," I replied mildly. My dad raised his wine glass. "Well, let's have a toast to Arthur's legacy. He certainly provided well for this family." Everyone raised their glasses except for me. I just sat there, my hands folded, watching them celebrate inheritances that were just a fraction of what I now controlled. "Clara," my mom prompted. "Your glass?" "I'm fine, thanks. Someone needs to keep a clear head for all that administrative work later." "Good thinking," Dad approved. "Always the practical one, our Clara." As they chattered on about their plans, Leo buying cars, Sophia quitting her job, Mom renovating the Sonoma estate, I found myself studying them with new, detached eyes. These weren't evil people. They were just people who had never bothered to see me clearly, who had made lazy assumptions based on very limited information. The question was, What would they do when that information changed? The shipping company is doing great, Dad reported during dessert. Arthur's investment in those new vessels really positioned us for growth. We're looking at expanding our routes, maybe even acquiring some smaller competitors. How's the cash flow situation? I asked casually. Dad looked surprised that I'd even ask a business question. Well, it's manageable. We've got some debt from the expansion, of course, but the revenue projections look solid. What about working capital? Do you have reserve funds for unexpected expenses? Now everyone was staring at me. Clara, Mom said with a light laugh, you don't need to worry your pretty little head about business details. That's your father's area of expertise. I'm just curious. Grandpa always said cash flow was the single most important metric for any business. We're fine, Dad said, though I noticed his jaw tighten just a little. The company is stable, but I had seen the reports. They weren't fine. They were surviving month to month, one major client loss away from serious trouble. After dinner, as I was helping clear the dishes, my mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. Honey, I know you're trying to be involved, but you don't need to ask your father all those difficult questions about his business. It's not really your area. I almost laughed out loud. Not my area? I owned businesses that generated more profit in a single month than Dad's company made in an entire year. Of course, Mom. I was just making conversation. I know, sweetie. But just leave the business talk to the business people, okay? As I drove home that night, I called my acquisition team. Present the offer on Monday morning. Make the terms generous, the timeline fast, and the payment all cash. And if they have questions about the buyer, I smiled as I pulled into my parking spot. Tell them the European investors prefer to maintain their privacy, but are very interested in supporting American maritime businesses. It wasn't exactly a lie. Have you ever been in a situation where your family completely underestimated your abilities? How did that make you feel? Share your experience in the comments below. You'll want to see what happens when Clara's family realizes who they're really dealing with. The offer arrived on a Tuesday morning. My dad called me at school during my lunch break, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and stress. Clara, something completely unexpected just happened with the company. We received a buyout offer this morning from some international investment group. Came totally out of the blue. I put on my most concerned voice. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know yet. It's a really good offer. Almost too good. I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. But I just don't understand why they want us. We're not that big in the grand scheme of things. What does your lawyer say? That's the thing. They want an answer by Friday. Professional investors don't usually impose such tight deadlines unless they're extremely serious. Well, maybe they see potential in the company that you're not seeing, I suggested innocently. Maybe. Look, can you come to dinner on Thursday? I want the whole family to be there to discuss this. You've always been good with details, and I could use another perspective. Another perspective. If only he knew whose perspective he was really asking for. Thursday's dinner was a world away from the week before. The mood was focused, almost tense. Dad had spread financial documents all over the dining room table, like he was planning a military operation. The offer is for $55 million, Dad announced as we gathered around. That's more than 30% above the company's official book value. Leo looked up from his phone, his eyes wide. 55 million? Dad, that's insane. Take it. It's not that simple, Dad replied, his voice strained. If I sell the company, what do I do then? It's been my entire life for 30 years. You retire, Sophia suggested. You travel, you relax, you enjoy the money. I'm 59. I'm too young to retire, but I feel too old to start over in a new industry. I studied the offer documents, carefully schooling my expression to show appropriate concern rather than the deep satisfaction I felt. The terms were exactly as I had instructed, generous enough to be tempting, structured to solve their cash flow problems, but not so outrageously high as to raise suspicion. "Who is this company?" I asked, pointing to the letterhead. "Orion Global Ventures." "A Swiss-based investment firm," Dad said. "Very legitimate, according to our research. They specialize in maritime and logistics acquisitions. What's their timeline for integration? What are their employee retention policies? Any planned changes to the management structure?" I continued, reading through the detailed terms. Everyone stared at me again. "Clara," Mom said slowly, "those are very specific questions for someone who doesn't work in business." "Grandpa always taught me to read the fine print," I replied, not looking up from the papers. "These terms are actually quite good. They're offering to retain all current employees for a minimum of 3 years, maintain the current management structure, and preserve operational independence." "How would you know what constitutes good terms?" Leo asked, his tone suspicious. I just shrugged. "I read the financial news sometimes. Business strategy is actually pretty interesting when you think about it analytically." My dad was studying me with a completely new expression. "Clara, you're asking better questions than my own business attorney did. Maybe I inherited more of Grandpa's business sense than anyone realized," I said with a small smile. The conversation went on for another hour, but I could see my dad's resolve was crumbling. He wanted someone to tell him not to sell, to validate his emotional connection to the company he had built. But the offer was simply too good. The terms were too attractive, and the financial relief was too necessary. I think I have to accept," he said finally, his voice heavy. "It's too much money to pass up. And honestly, the stress of managing the cash flow has been keeping me up at night." "Are you sure, dear?" Mom asked gently. "The offer expires Friday at 5 p.m. If I don't take it, I might never see an opportunity like this again." After dinner, I lingered in the kitchen, helping Mom with the dishes, while the others moved to the living room. "Your father seems relieved," Mom observed. "I think the business has been more of a burden than he let on." "Sometimes, selling at the right time is the smartest business decision you can make," I replied, carefully drying a wine glass. "You were very insightful tonight, asking all those questions. Very mature. It's got me thinking. Maybe you should consider a career change eventually." I nearly dropped the glass. "You think I could work in business?" "Well, not right away, of course, but maybe someday. You've always been smart, Clara. Maybe a little too smart for elementary education. Too smart for teaching." This from the woman who had laughed at my inheritance just 2 weeks ago. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice neutral. On Friday afternoon at 4:47 p.m., my father signed the papers. By 5:15 p.m., he was $55 million richer and no longer owned Sterling Shipping. And by 5:30 p.m., I owned the company my father had just sold me. I celebrated quietly in my apartment while Isabel called from Vegas to confirm the transaction had closed smoothly. "The paperwork is all filed," she reported. "Sterling Shipping is now officially a subsidiary of Orion Global Ventures, which is, of course, controlled by your trust. What are your operational plans?" "Keep everything exactly as it is," I said. "Same employees, same management, same day-to-day operations. I want nothing to change from an external perspective. And the former owner, he doesn't need to know who the ultimate buyer is." "Not yet." "Understood. Anything else?" I looked out my apartment window toward my parents' neighborhood. "Actually, yes. I want you to start looking into residential real estate here in Seattle. Something significant." "How significant?" the kind of house that makes a statement. The next morning, Dad called to invite the whole family to a celebration lunch. "We should toast to new beginnings," he said, his voice lighter than I'd heard it in years. "This feels like the start of a new chapter." "New beginnings," I agreed. I liked the sound of that. As I got ready for lunch, I caught myself smiling in the mirror. My dad thought he'd sold his company to a group of faceless foreign investors. He had no idea he'd actually sold it to his own daughter. The daughter he had underestimated for 27 years. The daughter who was just getting started. What do you think will happen next? Will Clara reveal her true identity, or does she have bigger plans in store? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The celebration lunch was at the Waterfront Country Club, where my dad had been a member for 2 decades. As we sat at their best table with champagne flowing freely, I felt like I was watching a play where I knew the ending. But the rest of the cast didn't. To smart business decisions, Dad toasted, raising his glass high. And to Arthur's legacy. He always said the shipping business would evolve, and maybe this sale is proof that he was right. To Grandpa, I added quietly, for teaching us all how to recognize opportunities. Everyone drank to that, though I saw my dad's expression grow thoughtful. "You know," he said slowly, "your grandfather was always pushing me to think bigger, to expand internationally. He said being a regional player was too limiting. Maybe selling to these international investors is exactly what he would have wanted." Leo was already busy spending Dad's windfall in his head. "You should buy a yacht, Dad. Something really nice for cruising up to the San Juan Islands. Or you could reinvest it wisely," I suggested casually. "The real estate market is strong right now. Property values in good locations tend to appreciate consistently over time." Sophia laughed, listened to Clara, giving out investment advice. Next thing you know, she'll be telling us all about market timing and portfolio diversification. "I might know a little bit about investment strategy," I said with a small private smile. The conversation flowed around me, but I was only half listening. My phone had been buzzing all morning with updates from property managers across 3 continents. The Singapore resort acquisition was moving forward ahead of schedule. My London commercial real estate portfolio had appreciated 12% in the last 6 months alone. My net worth was now approaching $1.8 billion. And here, my family was celebrating my dad's $55 million windfall. After lunch, I drove past the Sterling shipping offices, my shipping company now, though no one knew it. I parked across the street and just watched the employees coming and going, people who now worked for me without a clue. My phone rang. It was Antoine. "How are you feeling about your first major acquisition?" "Satisfied," I admitted. "I thought I might feel guilty, but mostly I just feel vindicated. No regrets about the secrecy?" "None. If they knew I was the buyer, they'd either demand special treatment or assume I was just playing with inherited money. This way, they have to respect the business decision on its own merits." "And your next move?" I looked at the building where my dad had worked for 30 years. The business he had built with Grandpa's guidance. The company that was now a small part of my international holdings. "I think it's time to accelerate things. I want to buy a house." "Any particular house?" "The biggest, most impressive house in Seattle. Something that makes people ask questions." Antoine chuckled. "Feeling ready to raise your profile? I'm feeling ready to stop hiding." That afternoon, I contacted Patricia Vance, Seattle's top luxury real estate agent. When I told her my budget range, her entire demeanor shifted from polite professionalism to intense, focused attention. "Miss Sterling, may I ask what line of work you're in?" "International business," I said vaguely. "Real estate and hospitality investments." And you're looking to relocate to Seattle permanently? I'm considering it. I have family connections here. We spent the afternoon touring properties that cost more than most people's entire neighborhoods. $10 million estates with home theaters and 1,000-bottle wine cellars. $12 million mansions with guest houses larger than my parents' entire home. Finally, a $15 million compound with its own private waterfront. This, Patricia said as we pulled up to the final property, is our crown jewel, the Westwood Manor. It's listed at $22 million, but the location and the views are simply unparalleled. The house was breathtaking, situated on 20 acres of land overlooking the city and Puget Sound. It was the kind of property that was regularly featured in architectural magazines. As we toured the grounds, I realized you could see my parents' entire neighborhood from the master bedroom's enormous windows. It was perfect. "I'll take it," I said. Patricia almost dropped her tablet. I'm sorry? The Westwood Manor. I want to make an offer. Don't you want to think about it, discuss financing, review the comparable sales data? I'll make a cash offer, full asking price, close in 2 weeks. Patricia just stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "Miss Sterling, this is a $22 million property." "Yes, I can count," I said calmly. I pulled out my phone and called David, my financial advisor. "David, I need you to wire $22 million for a real estate purchase." As I gave David the wire instructions, Patricia stood there, her mouth slightly agape. I could practically see her brain recalculating everything she thought she knew about me. After I hung up, she finally found her voice. "Miss Sterling, may I ask, what exactly is it that you do in international business?" I smiled. "I own things." That evening, I had dinner with my parents in their modest kitchen, while my phone buzzed with the confirmation that the wire transfer for a house worth more than their wildest inheritance dreams had been completed. "How was your day, honey?" Mom asked. "Productive," I said. "I looked at some real estate options." "Oh, that's nice. Thinking of upgrading from your little apartment?" "Something like that." My dad was reading the business news on his tablet, still processing the sale of his company. "You know what's interesting? This firm that bought Sterling Shipping, they've been acquiring smaller shipping companies all along the West Coast. This wasn't a random purchase, it was part of a much larger consolidation strategy." I kept my expression neutral. Maybe they see opportunities in the maritime industry that others are missing. Maybe. But it makes me wonder if I sold too cheaply. If they're building a regional network, maybe my company was worth more to them than I thought. "You got an excellent price, Dad. Don't second-guess a good business decision, I suppose. It's just..." He paused. "Your grandfather always said that consolidation was inevitable in the shipping industry. Maybe these foreign investors are the ones finally making it happen. If only he knew that his father's granddaughter was the foreign investor." My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Wire received. Congratulations on your new estate." I smiled and put my phone away. Tomorrow, I would start moving into the most expensive house in Seattle. It was time to stop being invisible. Moving day arrived exactly 2 weeks later. I had hired the most exclusive moving company in Seattle, the kind that relocated tech billionaires and celebrities. As their massive trucks pulled up the long, winding driveway of my new estate, I called my mom. "Hey, I'm moving today." "Oh, that's nice, honey. Did you find a bigger apartment?" "Something like that. You should come see it." "Of course. After your father finishes his conference call, we'll drive over." "What's the address?" I gave her the address for the Westwood Manor. Then I hung up and waited. The estate looked even more magnificent, with professional movers carefully carrying in furniture I'd had flown in from Milan, artwork I'd acquired at a London auction, and the few personal items I'd kept from my old life. I stood on the circular driveway, directing the placement of a bronze sculpture that had cost more than my parents' car. My phone rang. It was my dad. "Clara?" His voice was strange, tight. "Did you give your mother the wrong address? Number? Why?" "Because she's standing in front of the Westwood Manor. You know, the $22 million mansion that just sold to some mystery buyer." I smiled at my reflection in the enormous glass of the front doors. "I'm not in front of it, Dad. I'm in it." Silence. "Clara, that's not funny. I'm not joking." More silence. Then, we're coming up the driveway. I watched from the grand foyer as my parents' modest sedan pulled up behind a moving truck that was worth more than their house. Through the tall windows, I could see them just sitting in their car, staring at the mansion as if it might vanish if they blinked. When they finally got out, they approached the front door like people walking in a dream. I opened it and waited. "Clara." My mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Hi, Mom. Dad. Welcome to my new home." They stepped inside slowly, their eyes wide as they took in the marble floors, the massive crystal chandelier, the grand staircase that curved up to the second floor like something out of a palace. "Clara," Dad said carefully, his voice strained, "how exactly did you buy this house?" "I made an offer," they accepted. "A $22 million offer? Actually, 23. There was a bidding war." My mom grabbed my dad's arm for support. "Honey, this isn't possible. You're a teacher. Teachers don't buy houses like this." "Former teacher," I corrected gently. "I resigned yesterday." I led them on a tour through the house, watching their faces as we moved through rooms larger than their entire first floor. The gourmet kitchen with its imported Italian marble. The 2-story library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The climate-controlled wine cellar, already being stocked with bottles that cost more than their monthly mortgage. "Clara," Dad said, as we stood in the master bedroom, looking out at the panoramic view that included their own neighborhood far below. "You need to explain this, right now." "Explain what?" "How you bought this house, where this money came from, what is really going on." I walked to the window and looked down at the city spread out below us. From up here, all their problems seemed so very small. "Remember Grandpa's envelope? The letter?" "Clara, there is no way a letter explains this house." I turned to face them. It wasn't just a letter. Then what was it? A plane ticket to Geneva, and a notification that my trust had been activated. They just stared at me, their faces blank. "Grandpa established a trust for me when I was 16. I've been a billionaire since my 27th birthday, which was last month." My dad sank down heavily onto the edge of the king-sized bed. "That's impossible. Grandpa bought properties all over the world and put them in my name through the trust. I own casinos in Geneva and Las Vegas, hotels in London and Singapore, commercial real estate across 3 continents. The envelope you all laughed at? It made me rich enough to buy anything I could ever want." "Billionaire?" Mom whispered the word as if it were a foreign language. 1.8 billion, actually. As of yesterday's market close. The silence in the room stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, my dad found his voice. "If this is true, if you really have that kind of money, then why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. "Tell you? When? Was I supposed to tell you during the will reading when you were all laughing at my envelope? Or when Mom made that cruel comment about Grandpa not loving me? Or maybe when you asked me to help with basic administrative work because I was good with computers? We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said, my voice calm but hard. "You meant every word. You saw me as the leftover, the one who didn't matter, the one who got nothing while everyone else got millions. Clara, we're sorry. For what? for showing me exactly who you are, for proving that you only value people based on the size of their bank account. Dad stood up, his businessman's instincts finally kicking back in. Okay, let's discuss this rationally. If you have this kind of wealth, there are family considerations, tax implications, trust structures. We should talk about how to handle this responsibly. And there it was, the real reason for their sudden concern. Actually, Dad, there is something we should discuss. I pulled out my phone and opened an email. I acquired something recently that you might find interesting. What? Sterling Shipping. Orion Global Ventures, the foreign investment firm that bought your company? That's one of my shell companies. I bought your business. His face went white. You bought my company? For $55 million, which was quite generous, considering the debt load and the cash flow issues. Why would you do that? Because I could. Because I wanted to. Because you sold it without even considering if anyone in the family might be interested in keeping it. Clara, Mom said desperately, this is insane. You can't just buy your own father's company. I can. And I did. It's mine now. Completely. My dad's face was cycling through a series of emotions I had never seen on him before. Shock, anger, confusion, and something that looked a lot like fear. Give it back, he said finally. I'm sorry. The company, sell it back to me. I just shook my head. It's not for sale. Clara, that company is my life's work. It was your life's work. Now it's one of my business investments. I moved toward the door. I think you should both go home and process all of this. We can talk more when you're ready to have a real conversation. We're not leaving until you explain how you're going to fix this. I stopped and turned back to face them. Fix what? I bought a company from a willing seller at a price above market value. I moved into a house that I paid for in cash. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Clara, Dad's voice broke slightly. Please. For a split second, looking at his devastated face, I felt a flicker of the old Clara, the one who wanted everyone to be happy, who hated conflict, who would have done anything to fix things. But then I remembered the laughter at the will reading, the dismissive comments, the casual assumption that I was worthless. I'll see you both soon, I said gently, when you're ready to treat me like a member of the family, instead of like the hired help. After they left, I stood alone in my magnificent empty house, looking out at the view that had cost me $23 million. My phone was buzzing with congratulations from property managers, updates from financial advisors, and meeting requests from business contacts. But for the first time since opening Grandpa's envelope, I felt completely, utterly, and perfectly alone. And surprisingly, that felt exactly right. 3 days later, Leo called. His voice was laced with anger and something that sounded a lot like panic. What the hell is going on, Clara? Good morning to you too, Leo. Don't play dumb with me. Mom and Dad told me everything. About the house, about the companies, about you buying Dad's business. Is any of it true? I was sitting on my terrace, sipping coffee that cost more per pound than Leo probably earned in a week, looking out over a view that still took my breath away. Which part are you asking about? All of it. Are you really some secret billionaire? I'm not a secret anymore. This is insane. How is this even possible? Grandpa loved me more than you realized. Bullshit. He left you an envelope. We all saw it. He left me an empire. The envelope was just the key. There was a long, stunned pause on the other end of the line. Clara, we need to have a family meeting. All of us. Tonight. We already had a family meeting. It was called the will reading, remember? The one where you all thought my inheritance was hilarious. That was before we knew. Before you knew I had money. It's interesting how that changes everything, isn't it? Clara, come on. We're family. Are we? Because for 27 years, family meant you got the spotlight and I got ignored. What's changed? Besides my net worth, everything's changed. You can't just buy Dad's company and move into some mega mansion and expect us to what, Leo? To treat me with respect? To include me in decisions? To stop assuming I'm worthless? I set down my coffee cup. I'm not expecting anything from you anymore. I've learned not to. Fine. You want to play hardball? I'll call our lawyers. If Grandpa left you all this money through some kind of fraud or elder abuse. I actually laughed. Leo, I have the best legal team money can buy. They've already reviewed every single aspect of the trust structure. Do you really want to spend the next 5 years of your life in court battles you can't possibly afford, let alone win? You wouldn't. Try me. He hung up. An hour later, Sophia called. Then Mom again. Then Dad. All variations of the same conversation. Shock, anger, demands for explanations, threats of legal action, and finally, grudging requests for a family meeting. I ignored them all and spent the afternoon touring commercial real estate with Patricia. If I was going to live in Seattle permanently, I might as well make some local investments. That evening, I was in my wine cellar selecting a bottle for dinner when my security system chimed. The camera at the front gate showed all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Leo, and Sophia, standing at my entrance like some kind of poorly planned intervention squad. I pressed the intercom button. Can I help you? Clara, it's your family. Mom's voice crackled through the speaker. We need to talk. Did you make an appointment? Clara, don't be ridiculous. We're your family. The family that laughed at me, dismissed me, and threatened me with lawsuits all in the same day? That family. Please, Dad's voice came through now. Just let us in. We can work this out. I considered it. A part of me, the old part that had always craved their approval, wanted to open the gates and try to smooth everything over. But the new part, the part that had learned her own worth the hard way, knew better. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. You can come in, but we do this my way. You will listen without interrupting. You will not make demands. You will not threaten me. And you will acknowledge that everything I own legitimately through a trust my grandfather legally and soundly established. Silence. Otherwise, you can go home, and we can try this again when you're all ready to be civil. More silence. Then my dad's voice, defeated. Okay, your way. I opened the gates and waited in the foyer as they drove up the long, circular driveway. When they walked through my front door, I could see them actively trying not to stare at the chandelier, the marble floors, the staircase that belonged in a European palace. I led them to the formal living room, where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a glittering view of the city lights. I took the large armchair that faced them all while they arranged themselves uncomfortably on the sofa, looking like defendants waiting for a verdict. So, I said, crossing my legs and settling back into the chair. What did you want to discuss? Dad cleared his throat. Clara, we owe you an apology. For what, specifically? For not understanding the situation with your inheritance. For not realizing what Arthur had done for you. That's not what you need to apologize for. What do you mean? You're apologizing for being wrong about my inheritance. You're not apologizing for how you treated me. Mom leaned forward. Honey, we never treated you badly. We love you. Do you? Because love isn't what I felt during that will reading. Love isn't asking me to do your administrative work while you plan how to spend your millions. And love certainly isn't laughing when someone suggests that my own grandfather didn't care about me. We were shocked, Sophia said defensively. We just didn't handle it well. You handled it exactly how you always handle things that involve me. You assumed I was less important, less capable, and less deserving. Leo, who had been stewing in silence, finally spoke up. Okay, fine. We screwed up. We're sorry. But Clara, you bought Dad's company. That's not normal family behavior. Normal family behavior would have been asking if I wanted to be involved before you sold it to a stranger. Normal family behavior would have been including me in discussions about Grandpa's legacy. Normal family behavior would have been treating me like I actually mattered for the past 27 years. So this is revenge? Dad asked, his voice strained. Number, this is business. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the view that stretched for miles. I bought a profitable company from a willing seller at a fair price. I moved into a house I could afford, and I am living my life on my own terms for the first time ever. What do you want from us? Mom asked quietly. I turned back to face them. I want you to understand that Clara, the overlooked granddaughter, doesn't exist anymore. Clara, the billionaire businesswoman, does. And she doesn't need your approval, your permission, or your acceptance. Clara, Dad said desperately, I need that company back. It's my legacy, everything I've worked for. Then you shouldn't have sold it. I didn't know you were interested. You never asked. The room fell silent. Outside, Seattle spread out below us like a map of infinite possibilities. Inside, my family sat with the deeply uncomfortable realization that the power dynamic had shifted permanently and irreversibly. There is one thing, I said finally. They all looked up, a flicker of hope in their eyes. I want a public acknowledgement from all of you for the way you treated me at the will reading, for the assumptions you made, for the disrespect you showed. A public acknowledgement? Sophia asked, horrified. Social media posts, a statement in the local newspaper if necessary. Wherever you announced your own good fortune, I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong about mine. That's humiliating, Leo muttered. Good, I said. Now you know how I felt. And if we do this? Dad asked carefully. Will you consider selling me back the company? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'll consider it. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't even a maybe, but it was hope. And sometimes, hope is the most powerful currency of all. A week later, the public acknowledgement started to appear. My dad's was a formal notice in the business section of the Seattle Times. Richard Sterling acknowledges that he significantly underestimated the business acumen and inheritance of his daughter, Clara Sterling. Ms. Sterling has proven herself to be a sophisticated investor and businesswoman, and I deeply regret any dismissive comments I may have made regarding her capabilities. My mom's Facebook post was more personal, but just as public. I want to apologize to my daughter Clara for comments I made that suggested her grandfather didn't care about her. I was completely wrong, and I am so sorry for any pain my words caused. Clara is an accomplished and brilliant businesswoman who deserves nothing but respect and recognition. Marcus and Sophia's Instagram posts were briefer, but they were still satisfying acknowledgments that they had misjudged me. The posts stirred up significant local attention. Business journalists started trying to figure out who this mysterious Clara Sterling was, this major player who had seemingly emerged from nowhere. I politely declined all interview requests. As for Sterling Shipping, I surprised everyone by keeping my dad on as the general manager. He had the same office, the same responsibilities, the same day-to-day operations. The only difference was that he now reported to a management company that reported to a holding company that was ultimately controlled by me. The irony was not lost on either of us, but the real surprise came 6 months later. It was at a family gathering I'd agreed to attend at my parents' house. The atmosphere was different, more respectful, more careful, but also more genuine than it had been in years. "Clara," Dad said during dessert, "I have to tell you something about the company." I looked up from my wine. "What about it? The new ownership structure. It's actually been incredible. Having access to this new capital, being part of a larger shipping network, not having to worry constantly about debt service. It's allowed me to focus on what I do best instead of being under constant financial stress." "The employees seem happier too," I observed. "They are. They have job security, better benefits, clear opportunities for growth. I should have sold years ago, but my pride was too big to admit I was in over my head." My mom had been watching this exchange carefully. "Clara, can I ask you something?" "Of course. When you bought the company, did you do it to hurt your father or to help him?" I considered the question for a moment. Both, honestly. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have important decisions made without his input. But I also couldn't stand the thought of all those employees losing their jobs if the company failed. And now? Now it's just business. Good business, as it turns out. Leo, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet all evening, finally spoke up. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." "Okay. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? With all this money and power and this new life?" I thought about it. I'm content. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do, with people who see me for who I really am. "And us?" Sophia asked. "Where do we fit into your new life?" "That depends on you," I said simply. "I'm not the same person who sat at this table 6 months ago, desperate for your approval. I don't need you to like me anymore. But I would like to have a real relationship with you, if you're interested in getting to know the person I actually am." Dad leaned forward. "Clara, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you teach me about business? About how to think strategically, the way your grandfather did? I've spent 30 years running a company, but watching how you've handled all of this, I realize I never really understood business at all." I smiled, and this time it was completely genuine. "I'd like that, Dad." Later that evening, as I drove my Tesla home to my estate in the hills, I called Antoine. "How are you feeling about your new family dynamic?" he asked. "Different. Better, I think. More honest, certainly." "And personally? Are you happy with the choices you've made?" I pulled into my circular driveway and looked up at the magnificent house that had started this whole transformation. I'm proud of who I've become. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now, I'm exactly who I was always meant to be. Your grandfather would be very proud too. I hope so. I think he would especially appreciate the chess metaphor. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a few pieces to win the game. "And have you won?" I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. It was the same face, but it looked completely different, stronger, more confident, more genuinely myself than I had ever been. "I've won something better than the game," I said. "I've won myself." After I hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, just looking out at the city lights below. Tomorrow, I had a board meeting for my Singapore resort, a conference call with my London real estate team, and lunch with a potential business partner who wanted to discuss opportunities in Dubai. But tonight, I was just Clara Sterling, billionaire businesswoman, sitting in the driveway of her $23 million house, finally and completely comfortable in her own skin. It had taken 27 years and a very carefully planned inheritance to get here, but it had been worth every single difficult moment. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my yacht, the Legacy, watching the Seattle skyline glide by as we cruised on Lake Washington. It wasn't the largest yacht in the marina, but it was perfect for what I needed: a place to entertain business associates, host family gatherings, and sometimes just escape from the complexities of managing a billion-dollar empire. The past year had been transformative in ways I never could have imagined. The public apologies from my family had opened doors I hadn't expected. Seattle's business community had embraced me as a major player, leading to investment opportunities I'd never dreamed of. I now owned a controlling interest in one of the city's largest hotel chains, a portfolio of residential developments, and a tech company that specialized in maritime logistics. My net worth had grown to almost $2 billion, but more importantly, I had grown into someone I genuinely respected. The yacht pulled into the harbor where my car waited. That evening, I had dinner with the entire family at my house. It had become a monthly tradition, these gatherings where we actually talked to each other instead of performing for each other. "How are things at the shipping company?" I asked Dad as we sat around my massive dining room table. "Incredible. The integration with your other maritime holdings has opened up routes we never could have accessed before. We're actually bidding on international contracts that would have been impossible under the old structure. And the employees? Happy, secure. They know they're part of something bigger now." Mom put down her wine glass and looked at me thoughtfully. "Clara, can I ask you something I've been wondering about for months?" "Of course." "Do you forgive us? I mean, really forgive us, not just tolerate us because we're family?" I considered her question carefully. "I've accepted who you are, and I understand why you acted the way you did. You weren't malicious. You were just blind to possibilities you had never considered. That's not really an answer. Forgiveness assumes you did something to me. But in a strange way, you all did something for me. Your dismissal forced me to find my own strength. Your assumptions helped me discover my own worth. If you had seen my potential from the beginning, I might never have learned to see it for myself." Sophia leaned forward. "So you're grateful we treated you so badly?" "I'm grateful for the journey it started. Grandpa could have just left me the money directly, but instead, he gave me something much more valuable: the chance to discover who I really was before the money changed how the world saw me." Leo, who had been quiet through most of dinner, finally spoke up. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about earning respect versus just expecting it, and I realized I've never actually earned anything in my life. Everything I have came from inheritance or family connections. What are you thinking of doing about it?" "I want to work, really work, not just show up at some job Dad arranges. Would you consider giving me a chance at one of your companies?" Starting at the bottom, earning my way up, I studied his face, looking for any sign of his old entitlement. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen there before: genuine humility. "I'd consider it, but you'd start in the mailroom, literally, and you'd be treated exactly like any other entry-level employee. That's all I'm asking for." After dinner, I walked out onto my terrace with Dad. The city stretched out below us, millions of lights representing millions of lives. "Clara," he said quietly, "I need you to know something." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the success, but because of who you've become. You're stronger than I ever was, smarter than I ever realized, and kinder than I deserved." He paused. "Your grandfather saw something in you that the rest of us completely missed. He was right to trust you with his legacy, and he was right to structure things the way he did. You needed to learn your own worth before anyone else could see it." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Thank you, Dad. No, thank you for giving us a chance to know the real you. for forgiving us even when we didn't deserve it, and for being better than we taught you to be. Later that night, I sat in my home office reviewing reports from my various properties. Monaco was exceeding projections. Vegas was planning a major expansion. My phone chimed. It was an email from the director of my charitable foundation. The Arthur Sterling Foundation for Educational Excellence had just announced its largest grant yet, $100 million to support STEM education in underfunded schools across the Pacific Northwest. Tomorrow's news would feature photos of me presenting the grant check, standing alongside teachers who understood that education could change everything for a child who felt overlooked. I opened my laptop and began composing the foundation's press release. At the bottom, I added a personal note. My grandfather taught me that the greatest gifts often come in the most unexpected packages. Today, we're passing that lesson forward to the next generation of dreamers and achievers. As I typed those words, I could almost hear Grandpa's voice in my ear. Sometimes, the most overlooked person in the room is the one with the most potential to change everything. He had been right, as always. I had spent 27 years being underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. But that experience had taught me something invaluable. True worth isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself. Everything else is just details. From my office window, I could see my parents' neighborhood in the distance. They were good people who had made incorrect assumptions. The distinction was important. I pulled up my calendar for the next day, a board meeting, a conference call with investors, lunch with the mayor to discuss affordable housing initiatives. But first, I was having coffee with Charlotte, my former teaching colleague and still my closest friend. It was a monthly ritual to talk about everything except business, a reminder of who I had been before I knew who I was meant to become. I closed my laptop and headed upstairs, pausing at the window that overlooked the city. 1 year ago, I was a teacher who thought she had inherited an envelope. Tonight, I was a billionaire philanthropist who had inherited the wisdom to use wealth responsibly. The money had changed my life, but the real transformation had been learning to value myself. As I got ready for bed, I thought about the kids who would receive scholarships from my foundation, the ones who might feel overlooked in their own families. I hoped they would learn what I had learned, that sometimes the greatest gift is the journey of discovering your own worth. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible tales of transformation and triumph. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself. Thank you for joining me on Clara's journey. And never forget that the most powerful inheritance isn't money. It's the knowledge of your own capability.